My grandmother, may her soul be at rest, was an amazing woman. When she started showing signs of mental deterioration, she began to tell me things she was hearing and seeing. I remember talking to her, and I heard her say for the first time, "Tally is out there now." And she seemed terrified, staring at the front door, as if something unexpected and dangerous was right outside the door. She grabbed my hand and begged me not to go outside. I don't remember ever seeing her that scared before. So I did as I was told and watched movies with her, trying to keep her calm. I remember hearing tapping on the window behind us and her whispering repeatedly, "Tally is out there now," after each tap. I was afraid to ask her what she meant. She seemed like she was getting angry. She then asked, "Do I have any smokes left?" I nodded and told her that she couldn't smoke in the house because we had someone in the house who was on an oxygen tank. She got even more angry, but nodded and walked outside to smoke. She then stopped mentioning whoever Tally was. About 6 months later, she started up again, this time worse. She had completely forgotten my grandfather and didn't know who I was, but not Tally. She seemed scared, as if someone or something was out to get her. She'd point to her window, tears streaming down her cheeks, a slight look of terror in her eyes. "Tally is out there now." I was never alone with her during those visits, because everyone in the family wanted to visit her. Until one day I was there with my grandfather. He had to step outside for a call, and my grandmother grabbed my hand, her grip quite strong. "Tally is out there now." I happened to look to where she was pointing, to reassure her that nothing was there. But to my horror, it was not at all what I had expected. Someone was there. What I saw still scares me to this day. It was a man, dressed in 1940s to 1960s attire. He looked like he'd been in an accident, glass in his face, his arm twisted and mangled. He was missing a leg, and you couldn't rightly see the upper part of his face. The sight was horrifying to say the least. "Tally is out there now," seemed to be echoing from his lips as my grandmother once again stated it. The man then disappeared as my grandfather came back into the room. I never saw it again, yet I remember clearly feeling like I wasn't alone in the room anymore when we'd go visit her. Soon after those events, I remember waking up to a feeling that someone was watching me. I felt a tickle of air on my ear. My dog, who was at the foot of my bed, started growling. I then heard the faintest whisper, "Tally is out there now." I shot up in bed, frantically looking around the room, but no one was there. I started crying and ran into the next room to ask my grandfather if we could go visit my grandmother. He looked at me with sad eyes and broke the news to me that she had passed away that morning. I'm not one to believe in ghosts, and there are a lot of people that are just as skeptical as I am. But there have been a few occasions that have made me wonder. I have a close family member that claims she can see the dead. She describes her encounters as visions, where she can see deceased people roaming around. To think someone can have a gift like that kind of freaks me out. I don't know what my mom was thinking, but for some reason she asked her one day if she had ever seen anything in our house. I wished she hadn't, but she answered that she had, but she wasn't sure as to what it was. Fast forward to about 2 months later, my dad would wake up at 5 in the morning every day for work, and at about 6 a.m., he would wake me up for school. But this specific morning, it wasn't my dad that woke me up. Police lights and sirens bounced off the walls, followed by loud talking. Walking out of my room down the hallway, I called for my dad. He answered and said to come to the living room. I found him standing with 2 police officers writing down the things my dad had said. Scared, I asked him what was going on. He told me to wait. After the police officers left, he explained that he had woken up to all of the lights in the house turned on, as well as the TV in the living room. His first thought was that I had woken up early and did it all myself, but when he got to my room, I was sound asleep. Our house was fenced in and needed a special key to be opened. When my dad got to the living room, the front door was wide open, but the fence was still shut and tightly locked. You can't open the door from the outside without first unlocking the fence. But the weirdest thing of all was that there was a pot of boiling water on our stove. I didn't even know how to work the stove at the time. My parents swore it hadn't been them. There was no sign of any forced entries into the house. All of the windows were locked from the inside, and we only had one door. To this day, nothing was made of the situation, and I'm still disturbed by this. This happened a few years ago, so some specifics aren't super clear in my mind. One day I was in my bedroom sitting at my desk. I don't remember what I was doing, but the layout of my room was this. On the wall in front of me was my desk, the mirror, there was a window to my right, and the wall behind me had my loft bed. There was nowhere in that room any person could hide, and the door was in my range of vision. So there was no escape without me seeing and hearing, as it was an old house with loud doors and floors. During this time, I knew for a fact that I was alone in that room. I was sitting at my desk, minding my own business. I wasn't listening to music or anything, so it was almost completely silent in my room. After a while of sitting there, I started to feel weird, kind of like I was being watched. Then something in the mirror caught my eye. I looked up. In the reflection, I saw a gray-skinned, haggard-looking woman standing behind me. With the size of the room, she couldn't have been more than 4 feet behind me because she was standing upright in front of my bed. She was faced toward me, but I can't remember much of what her face looked like. I don't think she was particularly old, though. I whipped around after a second of staring, but she wasn't there anymore. I looked back into the mirror to see if she would still be there, but no. She was gone. I think I left the room after that because I was so unsettled by what I saw. I saw her once more under much of the same circumstances on a different day, but I don't remember much of that time. After the second time, I covered that mirror with a blanket and didn't uncover it for anything until I gave it to my sibling, with the warning that I had seen things in its reflection, of course. I told her to keep it covered, but she didn't heed my warning and said that she's been plagued by even worse things than that gray-skinned woman since bringing it into her room. This is a story that happened around a year ago during Day of the Dead. In my culture on this day, we would light candles for our loved ones and pray for them. After lighting candles one night, I was downstairs watching TV. It was around 6 or 7 p.m. My dad came downstairs and went into the kitchen. In our kitchen, we had a section we called Dirty Kitchen, where our washing machine and dirty clothes were. My father then came out and asked, "Did you turn on the light in the dirty kitchen?" I told him no, since I had only been in the living room watching TV. He then mentioned that maybe it had been our nanny who washed our clothes and forgot to turn it off. A few minutes later, I went into the kitchen for food. I saw something in the corner of my eye, then looked, and that's when I saw that the dirty kitchen's light was on again. This time, I was alone downstairs. I just turned the light off quickly and went on with my business, but I was a bit creeped out by it. Fast forward the next day, the light was on again. None of us had even been in the dirty kitchen because, well, there were no clothes to wash. I was starting to think this was weird, since nobody else had been down there yesterday other than me. My mother and I determined that we can kind of or faintly see spirits or feel them. Knowing this, I entered the kitchen that day, but this time, it was different. My body turned cold. It was as if that room was several degrees lower than the rest of the house. I was freezing, but also dizzy. I quickly ran out of the kitchen and settled in the living room. I was just watching TV, trying to forget the odd feeling I had, when my mom came downstairs and looked in the kitchen. She then called my dad down and I heard them whispering about the light again. I wanted to butt in and tell them something paranormal or weird was going on, but I kept my mouth shut. I didn't want to seem like I was making a mockery of our ancestors. I just wanted this to stop. I was so scared at the time. A couple days later, Day of the Dead was coming to an end. My parents were debating whether the light switch was broken or not. While they were more concerned about electricity being wasted, I had other concerns. Oddly enough, after Day of the Dead was over, nothing strange ever happened again. To this day, we still don't know what was causing the light to turn on. But if you ask me, it wasn't a broken light switch or anything practical like that. It was someone. A few years ago, my friend wanted to do one of those paranormal ghost hunts that were taking place in our local area. I thought, why not? I've watched loads of TV ghost hunts. It will probably be fun. And it was for the most part. The building we went to had a really horrible history, but there was a big roaring fire and comfy seats, and the atmosphere was more cozy rather than scary. They even fed us loads of tasty food. It felt like we had gathered around to tell scary stories. I never felt frightened once. A couple of strange things happened, and a spirit box clearly said my name, but that definitely wasn't evidence of the paranormal. I put it down to coincidence. In the middle of the night, the investigators got a Ouija board out and asked for volunteers. My friend and another person in the group wanted to do it, so I decided to join in too. It started spelling out words almost immediately, and I didn't pay much attention to what it said because I was so focused on watching the other two to catch them moving the pointer. I wasn't moving it, so obviously it was one of them. Except I was paying such close attention that I realized there were times only my finger was touching the pointer, and it still moved. I didn't understand how, and asked to look at the board at the end because I was convinced there must be magnets or something. As soon as it was done, out of nowhere, I realized I was really tired, just totally exhausted. One of the people in charge of the group who said he was a psychic seemed really concerned, and I had to reassure him I just wasn't used to being up at that hour. I'd been up since before 6 a.m., and it was now 4 a.m. the following day, so I just wanted my bed and chose to leave early. I got home, gave my dog some attention, and went to sleep. The next morning, I heard some weird noises that seemed to be coming from the door when I was in the bathroom. I thought it was quite weird, but ignored it. Probably a draft or a vibration from somewhere. I went into my bedroom and started getting dressed. I heard my dog being silly on the other side of the bed behind me. He was a German Shepherd, and very big, so he was making quite a bit of noise. Sounded like he was digging under my bed. I turned around to talk to him and see what he was doing, but he wasn't there. I checked under the bed and all around the room. Nothing. My dog was downstairs. This actually freaked me out because I definitely know what I heard. Over the next couple of weeks, I checked for mice because what else could it have been? Other things started to happen. From things like being certain I saw something move on the other side of a room in the corner of my eye to strange noises. Sometimes, things would just fall. A book falling off the table or a stack of plates clattering on the drying rack. I ignored a lot of this. I always just figured it must be a draft in there or something. Other stuff I couldn't explain. Once I was home alone, I just cleaned around the house and had been sitting on the sofa watching TV. When I decided to get a drink or whatever, I walked into the kitchen and saw some fruit rolling off the length of the counter. The fruit bowl was tall, and there's no way any fruit could tumble out. It was only about a third of the way full. Nobody else was in the kitchen. I couldn't explain it. Some things that happened were frightening. I'd be home alone and hear someone walking around upstairs. It was a different sound to the usual creaks. More than once, I woke up to my dog standing in the doorway of my bedroom growling. He wasn't much of a growler, and it terrified me. I'd go check expecting an intruder. The worst thing by far that happened was the last. It was a weekend morning, really bright and sunny. I woke up super early, let my dog outside, and we went back up to bed. I had a coffee and a book and was just planning on hanging out for a bit. After a bit, my boy jumped off the bed and looked out of the bedroom doorway, then just laid down. So I went back to my coffee and book. Then, out of nowhere, there was the loudest crash that came from the loft. I jumped. My dog jumped up, and then it sounded like something was falling down the loft staircase. There were noises of running up and down the stairs, and it was like all hell broke loose. I could have sworn there were at least 20 people up there just throwing things as hard as they could off the floor and walls, kicking things and running around like crazy. I could hear things smashing. It went on for a while as well. I was absolutely terrified. Could have sworn there were people up there. I heard running on the stairs but couldn't see anyone. When it stopped, neither of us dared to move. I didn't take my eyes off the stairs and eventually went up with my phone ready to call emergency services, but there was nobody there, and nothing, absolutely nothing was out of place.